Hello, Rick DiClemente here with Star Self and Astrology Unplugged. Welcome to episode 348. And it's good to have you. Tonight we'll be talking about the natal chart of the United States. And I thought through things and thought it might be pretty interesting to go over some of the finer details in our chart that you don't usually hear about. And there is a lot hidden in the US chart and some surprising things. And then we'll talk, of course, about what the US is going through at the moment, in the near future, etc. So, as you know, uh, probably have heard on this show, the US, nobody knows exactly when the US was born. Nobody even knows what day it was born. Most people think it was July 4th. Some people claim July 2nd. It's a really long argument, and no two astrologers agree, but there is a commonality of people who, there's a general consensus of people that believe that we were born on the 4th of July at around 5 p.m., which gives us, you see, one way you do this rectification, one way you work backwards and try to figure out what time the chart was really born, is you work backward through events. You take this event happened, then this is where the planets were at that time. So what did the planets do to that chart? So we've come to a pretty good consensus that it's Sagittarius rising, which made the 9/11 experience really stick out on that chart. And that's one of the really big factors that made it so. Also, we've given the birth chart to some of the greatest experts in the world and on astrology. And they have pretty much come to agree around the Sag rising. So you'll see in the US chart, okay, here's the US chart, and you'll remember 1776 at 5, just about 5:14 in the afternoon, with some of our very best astrologers working on this chart. And yes, it looks very slight to you because many of the planets are as yet undiscovered. So there's a lot of talk, and certainly we're all aware of Benjamin Franklin's great knowledge of the zodiac and astronomy and his almanacs, etc. But there's an awful lot of talk that a lot of the founding fathers were very talented with astrology. Of course, it's impossible to tell now. We keep digging into the stories, but there's really some strong evidence that they knew what they were doing, sorta, because of what's called electional astrology. Electional astrology is when you look at the planets and you like what you see and you make the event happen at the time that the chart is for. It's a very dangerous way of doing things, I found out recently, because you're playing God and you're not going to do very well when you play God. But this is the chart about 5:14 in the afternoon in Philadelphia. 4th of July, 1776. And you'll notice that one would think pre-discovery of Uranus, pre-discovery of Neptune, pre-discovery of Pluto. Look at what they did when they put this chart together. They put the sun next to Jupiter, next to Venus. In old astrology, Jupiter and Venus are called the greater benefic and the minor benefic. They've since not calling it that much anymore for good reason. It's kind of outworn its day. But it was really pretty much a common factor back then to put things lined up with Jupiter, which was the ultimate planet of good luck. and fortune, and Venus is the minor planet of the same thing. So here we have the Sun, Jupiter, and Venus all within 10 degrees. As you can see, the day was getting on. These three planets were about to set. So it's 5:30 and it's in July. So about another hour and a half, the sun would have been setting and rising sign would have become Capricorn. So this chart has Sag rising, Sun in Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, Venus in Cancer, Moon in Aquarius, Saturn sticking out strongly. So in a lot of ways, when this chart was chosen, how do I say this to you? It can even appear to you that the people chose the chart, but they ended up not choosing it. In other words, you can't do anything. It's going to happen when it's supposed to happen. And it's going to happen when the planets, when the chart matches who you are. There's nothing we could do to make the chart be born at a different time. We could not have been born 1 minute earlier, 10 minutes later, could not have happened. It's just the nature of nature. And I've seen this through trying to manipulate people's marriages, trying to get them married at the right time, etc., etc. And since then, I no longer do any electional astrology because I just let things happen when they feel good, when they feel normal, and when the spirit moves you. There's a lot to that statement. When the spirit moves you is a very big statement. It's not a casual reference. But anyhow, with basic astrology, this is a really good chart because these three planets represent the horn of plenty. They represent the cornucopia of the land of the riches. Let's go to America. The land is wide open. We'll go out, and what did they call it? Squatting. We'll go out and squat on this land and just go, that's mine. Well, it wasn't quite that simple, but it was almost. If you had a Philadelphia lawyer behind you and you had an axe to chop a mark on a tree. But anyhow, this chart is intriguing because if you study a lot of astrology, you'll find the wisdom that comes from many astrologers will almost always put a problematic aspect in the chart to Saturn. Here we see Saturn at the top of the chart. It's in the 10th house, which is its own natural house. It's in Libra, which is exalted there. That's the best house for it because Saturn can exude its energies in a fair and just way. But we do see a square right to the sun. And a lot of people in ignorance or with small amount of knowledge might think that Saturn squaring the sun is something you don't want to do. However, I've noticed, and I think a lot of people have noticed too, when Saturn is somewhat problematic in a chart, it can also be some pretty good news because it is frustrating enough to get you off your butt, to energize you, and to give you some encouragement to make things happen, make you industrious. Now we also see what clearly here, a bucket pattern, that the whole entire chart swings from the moon in Aquarius. And what that means is you've got a whole chart based upon the moon. Now, the traditional chart with Sag rising means that the traditional chart is ruled by Jupiter in Cancer. And Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, which means that's the best place for it. Well, with the moon being very strong kind of like a second ruler. When you got the moon strong in your chart, it makes you strong with your property, with your background, good attachments to your past, a good honoring of your ancestry, good health emotionally, good health to the public. The moon is the public. So there are a lot of real good reasons why this chart was chosen. I happen to think that it doesn't even matter what moment they chose because this chart matches who we were at that time. But you can't see it, but Pluto's on that chart, but hasn't been seen yet. Neptune's there, hasn't been seen. Chiron's there, Eris is there. All these little invisible factors are in the background, kind of hidden. And they came about at different times during the next 250 years, and they revealed to us deeper truths about us. And they weren't wrong, they were right. And they're a little bit scary, some of them. And there's a whole mouthful to them. I want to show you something first before we go on. I want to show you where the planets are right now. Let's see if I got that right. Okay, that's correct, but I got to put the full display on. There. There's where the planets are right now. Okay, now you see the full display of the planets. And remember, like I just got for Christmas, I just got a book with 1,000 asteroids. So Liza saw fit to give me a book explaining the meaning of 1,000 asteroids. And so I've got to get to work. And we all know that Sean's pretty good at understanding the asteroids. So I'll be taking them one at a time. Could you imagine adding 1,000 more points to this chart? Well, I have a tough enough time with 11 or 12. But you can see the point I wanted to make to you right now, and in case you felt it today, what do we have going on? We've got a bucket pattern to the moon in Cancer, and the moon is exactly opposite Pluto. So I don't know about you guys, but in the last 4 or 5 hours, I have felt very moody. I have felt very deep things moving in my family, issues like this. Now look and see, the moon is almost 29. Pluto is at 29. In a few minutes, this is at 5 after. In a couple minutes, the moon will go into Leo. And things will change a lot because that Cancerian energy will turn leonine, and Leo is a much more upbeat, non-brooding type of energy. But you do see that we are carrying with us now, right now. A moon is the handle. It's the handle of the bucket, and that's going to be with us for the next 5, 6 days as the moon goes through here, because all these planets are bunched together, just like a fan. Now, we're going to come back to this chart, talk about it many, many times. This is not the USA's chart. This is where the planets are at 5 after. I got 5 after 5. That's not right. I got to get this right. 5. There we go. 7. 7. Okay. There's the chart for when the show started. Even more important, because the moon is opposite Pluto right across the ascendant. So you notice the whole thing shifted when I moved it back 2 hours. So we can see that tonight's show will be very, very moving emotionally. No matter what we do, it's going to pick up the nature of where the planets were at 7 o'clock tonight. Now, let's go back to the United States chart. Okay. So this is the US of A chart, born in 1776, about 515. And like I said, this is the consensus chart where most astrologers, not all, have come together to agree that the Sagittarius is the sign it was rising. Now, when you can get a room full of thousands of astrologers, and you're not going to get them coming up with the same chart, and when you read through the literature of the day of the declaration and all, there are all kind of arguments about it. But anyhow, if one of the things that's really interesting about this chart is if you say this is the American chart, this is the one most Americans use, and you put on the outer circle where the planets were at 9/11, Pluto was here and Saturn was here. Pluto was here, Saturn was here. That's pretty astounding. That's tremendous pressure to the natal chart. But you can see that this little simple chart that we started with, which had Sun, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, and Mars, and the moon, and Saturn. That's all that was in that chart. Now we can see that in 1930, along came Pluto. And in 1780 something, along came Uranus. In the 1800s, along came Neptune. And so it filled out the chart. In 2005, along came Eris. So now the chart has become much more complex. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Astrology is so ignored, and it's understandable why it is. I don't try to convince anybody how it's valid. You're wasting your breath. But I'm telling you, astrology is much, much more truthful than you can even conceive. It's telling us much more information than you can even believe is there, yet to even arrive yet. So, when Eris came to us in 2005, the planet of disruption, and she's been in this sign. Let's see, that's where in 2005 she was placed right here, but when we went back to 1776, we saw that she was really at this point at that time. So when you go back in time and put the planets where they were, even though you couldn't see them, they end up being exactly where they needed to be when you study the nature of the country. We're Eris opposite the sun. And when you study what that means, you'll see that's very true. What is Eris about? Eris is about disruption. It's about it's about making things fair for everybody. Who does the whole world, who did the whole world used to look to for fairness? They used to look to the United States. They don't anymore because of what we have done and not done. But Eris is very consistent with the fact that it was discovered in 2005. Well, what the hell happened in 2005, 2006? Eris is the voice of, I'm not going to take it anymore. And whether this is the positive side of Eris or the negative side of Eris, One voice is saying, I'm not going to take it anymore. I get screwed all the time. I will fight unfairly if I have to. I'm going to make my point across no matter what happens. The Trump view, or the other view, which is we've been unfair to certain peoples. We need to get things fixed, uh, reaffirmed with all these different Indian tribes and financial treaties and et cetera, et cetera. So the time of reparations was to be 2005. Now, if Eris had come on board 1915, 1897, it could not have been discovered then. It could not have been discovered then. And my friends tell me, oh, that's because the telescopes weren't strong enough then. It's not the answer. The answer is we were not ready to see it yet. And when we became ready to see it, then the telescopes, poof, became magical and we could see it. That's how all this works. So in 2005, when Clark, I forget his full name, astronomer Clark in New Mexico, when he discovered Eris, and we started digging into the books and finding out what Eris was like. It was perfect timing because what had happened is as we grew through the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, 21st century, all of a sudden, you may not know this, but if you broaden your view and look around, you'll see that we have become much more able to handle bigger portions of our mentality. We have become bigger. It doesn't mean we're handling it right. We have a bigger psyche. We have a bigger, larger collective psyche. You go around 1969, 1970, when I was in college, you try to have a little meeting about meditation. Everybody looks at you like, they know what you're talking about. And it kept up appearing in the magazines, appearing in that magazine, appearing in that newspaper, appearing in that book, appearing in that book. All of a sudden, boom, 2023, meditation's everywhere. Grade schools, corporations. It grows through and into the collective. So you have to realize, and I'm going to slap the fingers of people talking about, oh, it's here, and it's here to raise hell with us. No planet comes to us to raise hell with us. Planets come just like shoots come to plants. The green shoot, the yellow shoot, the red shoot, they come when it's time for them. It's up to us what we do with it. There's a real sticking, pervasive attitude that these nasty planets are here to do nasty things to us, and look at what's going on. It's not how it works. When Pluto came to us in 1930 and scared the hell out of everybody with the rise of Hitler, and 16 years later, it brought about nuclear explosions in Hiroshima. Sure, it scared everybody, but it also brought us nuclear power. It brought us the ability to dive deeper into our own psyche. You saw this in our literature, in our plays, in our music. Deeper sense of self is coming out. You watch these old 1940 movies and 1942 movies. These people had the depth of a dime when you're trying to talk to them. Hi, Susan. How are you? Good today, Jim? Yes, nice weather today, James. See you. Tell Dad I said hi. there was just no depth to things. And as the 60s came along, and we've been living with Pluto for 30 years, the depth started coming. It started coming because these planets are one and the same as us and our development. So, not only did we start to have to look at Pluto in 1930 and Uranus in the 1700s and Neptune in the 1800s, but we then had to put them on the circle back in 1776 and see what they did to the chart. Because these people called our founders who founded the country didn't find the country with Uranus on it. They didn't find the country with Neptune on it. But yes, they did. Yes, they did. The reason they did is because it's not possible to do otherwise. It's not possible. In a natural world, write this on your license plate. In a natural world, you cannot do something unnatural. And you better get that deep in your head because the literature that's coming out now, which is based upon quantum mechanics and based upon synergy and synchronicity, is all based upon this factor that things come about when it's their time. That's why I no longer help people get married. Get married between June 1st and June 7th, but don't do it between 2 p.m. and 2:30. That used to be my old thinking. Now what I do is good luck, happiest wishes for your marriage. Get married when you feel like it. And that couple is going to get married at the exact moment without even looking at the planets. They're going to get married at the exact moment that they need to because the energies are there, or they won't get married. Likewise, if you got a couple that's forcing it, that they really are getting married for the wrong reasons, and they're trying to pick a good time with the planets and get married then, it won't happen. The doors will be closed. The police will come by. There'll be a parade outside. Something will happen, and you will not be able to declare that as your birth chart. So the chart is a lot smarter than we think it is. Now, going back to the USA's chart. So if we had a crystal ball and it were 1776 and everybody's busy playing their music and they're all having fun, but now that we go back, we see that not only was the sun next to Jupiter and Venus, it was also opposite Eris, but not for 250 more years. Now Eris was there, Eris was actually here, okay? But it'll appear in the chart at this time. All right. So now that it appears in the chart, and we don't put it on the chart until 2005, let's go back and see what happened when we started to populate the chart. The first one we saw was Uranus in the 1700s, the beginning of the industrial age. So pop, here comes Uranus, put on the chart in about 1780 something, 1787. It's put on the chart. And through time, it's amazing how the planet reveals to you its nature. Some psychic does not sit up on the hill going like this to pick up the nature of Uranus. It just becomes known. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody's digging through books to figure it out. It just becomes revealed to the psyche. That's how we got the nature of Uranus, the nature of Neptune, the nature of Pluto, all of them. It's really pretty magical. And it's really pretty darn um, accurate too. Now, there are two sides to Uranus. We're not going to get into it now. Um, but there's, what was the other god, honey? Prometheus. A lot of people feel that it was uh, inappropriately named Uranus at the time it was, and they've looked back in time and they really feel that it should have been named more in alignment with Prometheus because of what Prometheus did in his mythology, especially stealing fire. But that just goes with Uranus, because Uranus is the planet that's traveling just about upside down. Did you know? I didn't know this the other day. Did you know we have one planet traveling upside down? I did not know this the other day. Venus is traveling at 179-degree tilt on the axis. It's almost exactly upside down, Venus. 179 degrees. It's only 1 degree off perfectly upside down. And I guess what they mean by upside down is the poles that are determined by the magnetic structure around the planet. Earth is 23 degrees off. Pluto's about 45 degrees, but Uranus is quite tilted also. So when Uranus was put on the zodiac, I think it was 1787. It was no happenstance. Now, I don't know what happened that year, during those years specifically, but this caused an absolute revolution to this whole chart. And I will guarantee you that astrologers living at that time, once they put that on the chart, and believe me, astrologers are very loath to put new bodies on the chart because it's caused such a revolution. They saw this new revolutionary planet in the sign of Gemini, which means new radical ways of communicating in the job area. In the job area. So put that together. In your existing United States chart, it's now 1780 something. We now have new radical electric ways of exchanging data. Well, I'm sure when the um, Pony Express came along, etc., and the wireless, things really started picking up as far as Hermes and Mercury's ability to exchange data quickly. Now, notice what it did to the chart, because I'm born with the same thing. I'm born with the sun right here and Uranus right there. Well, we came up with a radical new planet opposite the ascendant for good. This is what made us permanently a throwaway society. This is what made us a childlike country. Come and grow rich fast, grow poor fast. American dream, make it happen quickly, make it happen slowly. Things they just happen quickly in America. You want to communicate your message to the world, go get some Americans to work on your subject for you, and it'll be out within seconds on the internet. So the Uranus had a lot to do with the United States becoming the leader of communication, the leader of industrialism. Also, it made us very trite and not take things seriously enough. And whenever you have two planets in Gemini, like the Mars and the Uranus here, you befall the tendency that's Geminian, which is to take things serious lightly and to take things lightly seriously. That's very much a Gemini principle. And we are seen that way from a lot of views of other countries. So we see this sticks with us very strongly for the rest of our life. Doesn't even matter what it's doing because it's so glued to the opposition to the ascendant. Okay? This also makes us unpredictable. We've also got Jupiter ruling the ascendant, which means we're all about unexpected, completely off the wall growth. And this makes it very unpredictable. So you could go on and spend a lot of time talk about what Uranus had done, but the main thing that it did do was bring a phenomenal age of industrialism to the country. Then along 1870 or so, I can't remember the date, here's Neptune is discovered. And Neptune is placed on the chart. It's found to be, it's found when we looked it up, it was found to have been at 22 Virgo back in 1776. So it was placed at the right point. This is not the point it was found at, but when we found it, we got the ephemeris of the collectivity of all the planets, and we were able to place Neptune in its proper place. Now, Neptune in Virgo in the ninth house is a very intriguing place because it's very got a dual nature. You've got the spiritual, high spiritual value of Neptune in Virgo, which probably symbolized that you could come to your country, this new country, and your religion would not haunt you. It would not trace you. It would not, you would not be held back because of your religion until 2023. Now that's when it's all starting. Somewhat. But you also see that Neptune in Virgo, it's just um it's an oxymoron because Neptune's all about anything goes, and Virgo is all about just this specific thing goes. Neptune's anything, Virgo is specific. So we see schools developing, we see higher ed developing with Neptune here. We see that the country's based upon freedom of religious thought. But what did we find? What did I find in 2023 that knocked me over? I couldn't even believe I hadn't seen it before. In 2023, I found Neptune closely square to Mars. And Mars is in Gemini. This is a very tough aspect. Very, very tough. Because you've already got Mars in Gemini, which is symbolic of, hey, I can do anything I want to do. I can just talk about what I want to. Freedom of speech. I mean, freedom of speech in off the wall ways. I can do anything I want to. But it was square to Neptune. And when it's square to Neptune, Neptune says, oh, yeah, just do anything you want. Don't worry about it. So this really hurt this country. Helped us in some ways, but this has really hurt us in many ways because this is what keeps us unglued, uncentered. This is what gives us a false belief that we can do this in 5 minutes and it'll stick around and it'll satisfy me. Instant gratification. That's what this symbolizes. This is a very tough planetary aspect to live past. But I think it has a lot to do with freedom of religion, and that's why people came across the sea. When you're in a birth chart, in anybody's chart, Pay special attention to anything near the top. Any planets that are near the top. They're high in the chart. They're very important. They're very public. They're very much seen. They're very important to the future growth of that country. And they also have a lot to do with how your country is seen by others. So then we move along, ba-dum, 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 and then it's 1930, and Pluto is found. I can't remember where she was. But once 1930 came and we figured out where the planets were, we put it on the birth chart of the USA, and here it is at 27, 28 degrees of Capricorn. Okay? And we find it right opposite Mercury. So now our Mercury, which was, what kind of thinker do you have? What kind of mind do you have? Our Mercury, which was in Cancer, or we were born during Mercury retrograde, isn't that interesting? A Mercury in Cancer is rather mild, it's somewhat intuitive, it's somewhat simple. It's not a very complex, deep Mercury. All of a sudden, we find out in 1930, boom, we were born with Mercury opposite Pluto. Now, when you have planets born opposite Pluto, what it usually means is somehow, somewhere, there's pressure on you to think that you're not deep enough. There's pressure on you to think that you're not mentally strong enough. So this comes across very much as a mental challenge. And we've certainly had our hands full of wonderful psychologists and wonderful authors to provide great works of depth with the Pluto opposition to Mercury. But what this planet did and assured us, not even going over the T-square that it formed, with Pluto opposite Mercury, we were no longer going to get away with rather shallow thinking. Wasn't going to happen. Not when Pluto's there. Now, when a country was formed and you didn't know about Pluto, nobody knew this was going to happen on the conscious level. They did at the unconscious level. So now we got Pluto opposite Mercury. We got Neptune squaring to Mars. We got Uranus across from the ascendant. We got a whole different chart that we never had in the 1700s and 76. Then, here's a little sleeper for you. It sneaks up on us. 1977. What happened in 1977 besides Jimmy Carter? We have the discovery of Chiron. Chiron's every 51 years, goes around every 51 years. Chiron is known for your wounds. It's known for your the wounded healer. It has to do with your wounds and your healing, and also a lot to do with your destiny. It's a very medical planet, very much aligned with Virgo. So what did you start seeing in 77? I don't know about you, but I started seeing healers pop out of the baseboards. They just came out of the walls, healing this and healing this. And you could go to all these seminars and learn how to deal this and how to feel that and do that. That's because Chiron came to us, to our natal chart, in the sign of Aries. So we come to find out, not only did Chiron, let me get this straight now. Not only did Chiron come to us, but when we place it on this chart, it became opposite Saturn and it made a T-square to the Sun and Mercury. And Mercury's already opposed to Pluto. So now our little tiny Mercury, which had it pretty good there for a while, is now facing Pluto and it's square to Eris. I'm sorry, Chiron. So what this became, and you would have to look back in the books and become kind of an expert, but in 77, what we discovered is that the American intellect became much more capable than it ever even dreamed of. And look at the movies that came out around then. When the big planets come out, it's like different dimensions of your psyche open up to you, or it destroys you because you can't handle it. You'll see this happen with some younger countries. They come, they puff, they go away. Not in our case. Our case, we have a very strong mentality. We have strong capabilities. And even though we have some rather infantile planets in our chart, we pick up a lot of advanced seasoning from the opposition of these outer planets. Opposite Pluto, opposite Neptune, opposite Uranus. So all of a sudden, Mercury gets bombarded. And I would tell you without even looking, Mercury is under so much pressure now that we're going to become endangered from those moments forward in the houses where Mercury rules. So let's take a look. I don't do a lot of this, but the other Rick does. But Mercury rules the seventh house. What does that mean? This is the house of your open enemies. This is the house of enemies that you know you have and how you communicate with them. This is the house of how you relate to everybody else. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe 1770s, I'm sorry, I believe around 1977 was one of the heights of 1978 Israeli wars. Okay, so those things have come about through what Jimmy Carter was doing. So what we see is that that pressure on Mercury, ruler of the seventh house, has now placed the United States in a major role of mediary. Mediary. Certainly, Carter tried to play that role. But this is happening on many, many, many dimensions now. Remember, many dimensions. And you're taking a little country with a Mercury in Cancer and requiring it to become a mediary internationally. This is a hell of a change. A lot of pressure has been put upon the United States at that time. Intriguing. Now let's go further. And you can think of all kind of other possibilities too. Then along comes 2005 and Mr. Trump. And Eris is found, and it's discovered that Eris had entered Aries. Yeah, Eris was discovered. Eris has been here the whole time that we've known it. It's actually been in this area right through here. And it entered Aries in 1920s, 1921. So it's been in this area. But back in 1776, you see that Eris was back at the middle of Capricorn. And what does that show us? We're born with our main planet, the sun, opposite the toughest planet that there is. Whether you're putting Eris on your chart or not, it's the tough mama. What does Eris say to your Sun, anytime the planet is opposite another planet, anytime one planet's opposite another, such as Sun opposite Eris, it bespeaks of your relationships. All your relationships that you've ever had, because this stuff works in retrofit too. All relationships that we ever had are going to have tough, tight rope walking tension between everybody else when it comes to the subject of fairness. Who's going to get screwed? Who's not going to get screwed? How are we going to keep things even? How are we going to make sure everybody is heard justly? And that sure hasn't happened. Now, 2005, she's now in the consciousness of all of us. And what are you hearing everywhere? Black Lives Matter. You hear so much about reparations. Let's give the Indians back some of their land. Let's take the Indian names off the football teams. Let's do what we can to go into the past and repair these things. People are taking Columbus Day off of the calendar because he came much later. The people were already there and he didn't even come near America. So we're trying to clean up our history books too, which is not simple. So what is Eris about? Let's make it really simple. Because if you've noticed in the past 5 years, I've been an Eris fanatic. And the reason I have been is because I got very tired of talking about Pluto. Okay. But moreover, Eris is, yes, it can be violent. Yes, it can be blunt. But Eris is really fair. It wants fairness. It cannot put up with BS. It can't put up with jerks in the White House. It can't put up with jerks in the Capitol. It can't put up with jerks in your state house, in your local community house. It just wants things cleaned up. And when I say this to you, listen to me closely. It's not an it out there. There's no it. There's other stories about this, but it's us. It's the natural part of us that is growing, and our growth has run into a block that says, well, I can't get past that blockage until we start becoming fairer in this way and fairer in this way. And it's a natural part of evolution that says we cannot grow forward with the same economic systems and health systems that we've always had. It can't happen anymore. So they got to go or we got to go. Sounds an awful lot like what's going on now. But the problem now is the expert deceivers with their big money. They've known this all along. They didn't know it was theirs, but they knew how to get us divide and conquer. It's the Democrats. No, it's Republicans. No, it's them. No, it's them. But the heiress inside of us, which is just a natural part of us, is insisting on no more BS. And if you think that last election was something, wait till the next one. And the last one was pretty darn scary when you considered somebody's trying to coup, somebody's it's divisive between the vice president and the president. You got people breaking through the windows in the Capitol. I mean, it's pretty heavy stuff. But a lot of it's because of the chaos. This is how Eris works. Eris works through chaos. It works via chaos. Eris works, I don't care how much chaos I'm going to need to use. I will use it. Watch me very clearly. I'm telling you exactly how Eris is. And speaking of Eris, Rick comes on board. Maybe he can add a few words. But the point is that she is going to bring about fairness no matter what the cost. And that's a big statement. That's a very big statement. Now, we were born, we didn't know it for 250 years. We were born with our sun opposite Eris. And that means that every relationship that we have with people inside our country, outside of our country, that issue is going to become paramount. There's nothing you can do to stop this. There's nothing you can do to alter this. This theme of fairness is going to be the centerpiece on the table at all our discussion. Or somebody better go over and just knock over that Statue of Liberty into the water. Because the Statue of Liberty has become a meaningless joke unless you respect the nature of Eris. These words on the statue about fairness and equality to all, blah, 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 blah. That's what Eris really means. So we see that even though we got married or we got founded during a 1776 rather mild time, we see that once the new planets, and remember, there's a whole lot more coming, many more. But Eris is a really major one. Eris says we want relationships with people only if everybody plays fair, only if everybody gets invited, only if everybody has the same shot for housing, for food, for medical. And you're hearing this everywhere. And you keep seeing the old forces at play going, oh yeah, but, oh yeah, but, oh yeah, but, oh yeah, but let's slip it to the side, slip it to the side like we always did. And that won't go anymore. That won't go anymore. That will not fly anymore because Eris will not let it happen. And the Eris inside of us and apparently outside of us is what I'm talking about. It's not going to let it happen. It's just not part of nature anymore. Um, so those are the big things that I discovered looking at the USA's chart. I've also found something neat in astrology where, let's say, for instance, you look at Ben Franklin, who had one of the most remarkable charts ever. If you look at his chart and look at his Eris, it's a phenomenal, powerful planet in his chart, even though it wasn't known. Planets have a dual nature. They have a special, I was known before then. Liza, here he goes. I'm out. Okay, everybody. So what I'm saying to you is when a lot of new people are going to start preaching to us that we all have to adopt these new qualities of being fair and being just, it's going to seem to a lot of people that they're shoving it down our throat. And it's very American and it's very human to say, I don't like things shoved down my throat. And they're going to raise hell about it. But the fact is, the reason it's being shoved down our throat is because that is what evolution requires. Or get off the train. that simple. Get on the train with the new rules or get off the train. I don't know what the train's going to do, but I do know that these are the new rules of the new world. And we know a lot of cool people, and I'm sure most of the people we know will play with the fair rules of everybody included and everybody sharing. But there's a whole lot of people that aren't going to want to play with that. And that's the dividing line that we're at now. Make any sense to anybody? Let me hear your, let's hear from Mr. Rick. We call him Rick C. On his opinions on this sun opposite Eris.
Yeah, that sun opposite Eris also reinforces the fact that Eris was in our fourth house, which really rattled the way we were moving towards revolution, trying to shake up the home life and break with colonialism. And that just seems like it's reinforcing things that were part of our founding. It would be interesting to see what other messages are in Eris. If you want to do a future podcast on the discovery of Eris, I'd love to see what the time shows, to see what it's supposed to be doing with us. But you are bringing up a whole lot of wonderful fodder. I think we could probably find a lot of comments and questions from the crowd.
Well, I hope so. And I want to just reiterate a couple things to you because it's easy to get lost. Eris is the she's the brother of Mars,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And she's all about not being excluded. I ask you, have we not taken an entire continent of South America and excluded them?
Oh, yeah, because they're not considered
I
Americans.
ask you, have we not taken another entire continent of Africa and excluded all of them? Because us white people are more important? Have we not taken a chunk of white people and declared it to be a penal colony? So we pretty much have wiped out the whole southern part of the globe because they're not white and drinking white wine. And you can see now, that's the point now. The point is, you see, that's what's so hard about this. An astrologer is teaching you what's normal, what has to happen. Not because some heebie-jeebie waves out in the planets. It just has to happen for normal evolution to occur. And we cannot keep screwing the people of Colombia and Peru and Uganda and all these different countries and expect to keep shoving gold in our mouth. This can't happen. Or we can talk about the or, and the or is Eris will bring chaos. She doesn't care. She doesn't care what she has to do. She doesn't care what she has to do. And I think you can see that. I think we saw that on January 6th. Everybody else's opinion? By the way, Claudia could not be with us. Yes, Linda, go ahead, dear. You need to unmute yourself. Anxious for your opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. This is phenomenal. I've never heard anything on the United States chart that just laid it out. You know, it's like with some passion and really understanding, not just pieces, you know, it's really
Right,
phenomenal.
that's right.
So 2005, the discovery time, I was just, as you were talking, I
Right.
wondered if if it kind of correlates a little bit with Obama becoming president
Of course it does.
in
Yeah.
2009, because we had to have that expression
Yeah.
shown to us.
Certainly did.
The seed was sown
That's
when
right.
Obama became president. A seed is part of it anyway, as much as he could do. Just the fact that he was elected was
Yes,
the
that's right.
sowing of a seed of fairness.
And you can definitely sense, you can argue if you want, but if you're somewhat fair, you can argue that he and his wife were very fair people.
Oh,
They were
totally.
really,
Yeah,
really trying
absolutely.
their
Yeah,
best to keep everybody
absolutely.
happy. And one of the things I want to
Yeah.
say here before I cool off too much, this has to happen. I care. I know a lot of people that care. I give a shit. I see too many great things in this country for us to go poo-poo because of somebody's card at their country club. I'll rip it up and burn it down. It's time for us all to have a big party and see the enormous things that we can do together. Think of the talent we have. Just look at these 9 people on this screen. That's the voice of Eris. That's who is speaking. Okay? Don't let somebody come by and say, oh, Black Lives Matter. I'm the one who helped start that movement. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. It's all Erizan. And it's time for her. Come on, Catherine, give us your world traveled opinions. Newly married, world traveling
Well,
Gemini.
since I like to listen, and I'm not really very knowledgeable of astrology at all.
You don't have to be, but
I know I can see
you've
that.
seen the world.
Yes, and
What state
I
do you see the world in?
well, just getting closer to home or family life. When you mention people, I've been aware in conversations of how I see things, which is very similar to how you see things. I'm very big on justice and fairness, and I'll pay my fair share, and I don't want to rip anyone off, et cetera, et cetera. I do within my own extended family, am shocked at others who have developed opposite attitudes. And and I went visiting those relatives, recently, who were estranged from me for a bunch of years. And one of my kids said to me, Mom, are you aware of what your relatives think these days? Because Grandma and Grandpa are flipping around in their graves. And I said, I kind of think, but I can't believe it. And then I went visiting and we couldn't even have a conversation.
Right.
I kind of couldn't believe the only word I can use is ignorance.
Yeah.
Not willing to read an article, not willing to listen,
Mhm.
closed, the mind closed, decided, and don't bring it up around here. Don't bring it
That's
up around.
exactly right. And
And
that's suicidal.
and in that particular family, which is a big family, I was around when all those babies were born, but I kind of don't see them anymore. There's 1 out of 5 kids who's like I am. And it became so embittered in the last few years that she refused to come to Thanksgiving dinner and bring her children from Kansas to Charlotte. And it caused a major family, they didn't speak.
Well, now
That,
blow that up on a national
yeah,
level.
right.
Blow that up on a national
So
level.
what they
Because
did
that's
this
what
year,
you've got.
well, here's what they did this year. They pretended that all didn't happen. And the way we're going to solve it is you're not allowed to talk about it.
No.
No,
Wow.
that's what.
This is evidence of the fact that the USA's chart was a baby chart. It
Mhm,
was very infantile. And through time, these added pressures that came on, and added talents, they're
mhm.
both there. They're there, but we have to loosen our belt. We have to make room.
Right.
You know, when I fly across the country and I keep thinking of all these people trying to get across the border, and I look at state after state after state of open fields.
What I do too.
My
Just
God, there's just tons of acreage where
you could
people
build
could live.
houses everywhere.
The
Tons.
problem is here, and it's fear.
It's fear that
It's
you're
fear.
gonna take
That's right.
my
You're
tax
gonna
money.
you're gonna take the money that I'm making.
Yeah, you made the money and now you weren't raised like this because you didn't have any money, but now you have some money and you think it's justified that nobody, everybody's a slacker who's stealing your money. They're all bums.
Yeah.
No, they're lazy.
Right.
They except that
They'll take your jobs.
yeah, I had employees. If you know people, I had employees who were underprivileged. And until I sold a small business last year, and I know what those mothers went through to get to work. And I know they stood on their feet and cut hair all day, and nobody was slacking. And
Yeah.
their daycare got paid for. That's the only way they could get to work.
That's
So
right. And
I
this
couldn't have
chart,
had, I couldn't have had a business unless
without
they did come to work.
that's
So
without
it's
them.
a circle. But if you don't know anybody like that and you don't hang out with them or meet them or listen to their life,
And
no, ignorant.
take a look at this. This is 1776. Here's Pluto. And for 250 years, Pluto has been going around the circle, very slowly for a long time. And in the last couple years, Pluto is now back right there.
Wow.
Now, when Pluto returns, I don't have to even tell you what that means. And you're non-astrologers. When
Huh.
Pluto returns, it comes back and it goes, let me have that clipboard of that application that was filled out in 1776. Uh-huh. Let me see that loan statement. We loaned them $16 million at that time. Okay, let's bring all the officials in now. Let's find out what have you been doing since then?
Mhm. Mhm.
What have you done to follow your charter? And I told you in my observation, the number one failure that when Pluto gets on you because of failure, the number one reason, without a doubt, is because you have gone off course of your mission statement.
Mhm. Mhm. I agree.
Yeah, Rick.
I think this also brings to mind the relationship issues the country has with the world because of that Pluto opposite Mercury.
Exactly.
And I've spoken about that when I've discussed the American chart. The retrograde Mercury in opposition is totally wrapped up in every peace treaty, every business agreement, every concerns over climate change that we're supposed to be working together with, because that wouldn't be considered just a peace treaty. And we are failing to be trusted because we have shown ourselves to not be trustworthy as a nation.
Did you see what who's the guy that did Captain Kirk?
William Shatner.
Did you see what he said after he came back from space at age 92?
Yes.
And he came back and he was interviewed on what it was like. And he said he looked out into the vastness of space and he saw how immense it is. And how in the middle of all this blackness is a little tiny little beautiful blue planet that we're screwing up. He said it was just disgusting to see it from his perspective. And he was worried to death. When are we going to get that viewpoint? And the age of Aquarius that's upon us is certainly welcome because it's one of the hopes. Go ahead, Linda. we can't keep Linda much quieter than this much, because Linda's got a lot to say.
No,
Oh,
actually, I don't. You weren't talking to me, were you?
No, I was talking to Linda Jordan.
There's another Linda Jordan. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
oh no, that's no problem. No problem. Well, you know, I went to see the movie The Boys in the Boat this week. It came out on Christmas Day, and it's you know, in a season of like really terrible choices of movies, it was the only thing that was appealing to me, and it's a movie that is very Arisian. Made by George Clooney about the 1936 Washington University 8-man crew team that, against all odds, ends up winning the university Olympic trials and going on to Berlin in 1936. And the movie, aside from being the people participating, this was in the middle of the Depression in 1936, and things were terrible. And most of the people on this team were not athletes. They joined the crew team because they needed to eat and have a place to live. And I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to spoil it, but along the way, everything that could happen that could possibly people trying to stop them because they weren't supposed to be. They weren't the elite team. They weren't supposed to win. They weren't the ones that the country expected to send to the Olympics. And I just sat there and I thought to myself, well, George Clooney, I mean, and it's about like what happens when you win and then the people who are in charge of things trying to make you not win. It was such just a very underground shot at this whole notion of Trumpism and how you can, well, I don't like who won the election, so I'm just going to change it. And but what struck me about it was the theater was packed. It was the one show that it was hard to get a seat to, and I got the last seat for the showing, and the one before that had been just completely sold out, and people applauded at the end. And I took that to mean, and this was an ordinary sort of North Hills bunch of people, so it wouldn't have been like all liberals or all conservatives. It's just an ordinary group of adults. There weren't very many kids in there. And I think that people, even if they don't register it mentally yet, they've got it in here that you can't be a spoil sport. You can't do this anymore.
Exactly.
And I do think that if you start to look at cultural products, we might start to see a little bit more of that, of and there may be, even going back a couple of years, some things that if we say, oh, that movie or this song or this TV show or what have you, where
That's right. That's
where
right.
the idea is not this sort of documentary anti-Trump thing, but it's sort of this larger statement about these historical forces that try to keep the status quo going and keep certain people out rather than in. So I left the theater very hopeful that maybe things are changing.
Oh, I think they are changing. We just got to keep at it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Any thoughts, Erica?
Been stuck.
Oh, you must have your headphones in.
Oh,
Hello, Erica.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now that I have the earbuds out. I've just been looking for the origins of, why is it that people keep trying so hard and they keep getting beaten down, and these forces just keep coming up, even though we claim, that this is America the Great and you can be who you want, and yet every cycle something keeps happening. And just looking at how we really started with a bunch of landowners who were the ones that had the power, and they still discriminated against all the people that were not educated. Schools started to be made only for ministers. Ministers could only be men. Later on, people that, when industry started happening, they made universities for people who had to get more education in order so that they could run companies, but it was for men, and the women went so that they could meet their brothers' boyfriends so that they could get married. Then they dropped out of school, and everybody was always trying to hold that power and keep that structure and whatever they built to themselves, and not let anybody else ever have it, whether it was in ministers, whether it was in the university. And those are the people with that kind of thinking that have a fit when they see, oh, here's somebody that came from a family that I never heard of, and they did better than my Johnny in school. How dare they? But I got Johnny through because I endowed the school, and what's his name? Supposedly graduated from Fordham and all this kind of thing. So then I've been watching what happened with Father Coughlin in the 1930s and how this whole fascist thing, I had no idea that he had millions of people listening to him all over the country. And I don't know how Rome didn't stop him. He was supposedly a priest, and he was spreading anti-Semitism, Nazism. They were using government money to send out, mail to people. They were brainwashing people. The powers that be are constantly trying to brainwash us. And the latest thing is saying that education is spoiling the kids and they shouldn't be reading these books, because going back to William F. Buckley Jr. and the whole Heritage Foundation, it's all about, those people that are liberal, they want to give everything away. And anybody is liberal that's a little bit to the left of them, even other conservatives. And now they're saying, oh, we used to be able to have free speech in universities, but now look what's happening. They're not allowing them to speak. All of this is manufactured. It is so devious. All of this stuff is going on behind the lines, and we're just getting like little, people don't have long attention spans, and they don't have time. Everybody works hard, and then they're exhausted at the end of the day, and they don't have time to dig into this. So, go to trade school. Don't learn history. Don't learn math. And then when you open your business, go discriminate against people like we tell you to. That's what they want. And this is why we steps forward, one step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And, I hope we get there. And it's true. We were given a lot, and the world now sees that we're not who we claim to be. And we see that we're not going to keep protecting the world, and that everybody has to kind of do for themselves, and we're not the great power anymore. And we watch Putin just ready to pounce at any moment. Maybe we're waking up.
Okay, hold on a moment. I think you're exactly right, and I thank you very much for your good words. Thank you, Erica. I'm going to go to Susan in just a minute, but I wanted to read to you something first that Deborah just posted. Then we'll finish with whatever Susan has to say. After I get all my buttons straight. She said, this is written by somebody named Antonio Gramsci. The old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. And now is the time of the monsters. I think that's really excellent. Thank you, Deborah. Now let's finish up with Susan.
I just wanted to say that our entire system was founded on checks and balances, which is a principle that is supposed to maintain an equilibrium. And when you scheme to rig the system, to tip the balance of power, the question is, will we be able to get the balance back? I mean, when you're
Yeah.
talking about Father Coughlin in the 1930s, the Catholic Church stepped up and policed their own. He got defrocked. He lost all of his listeners on the radio. He had over 1 million people following his weekly show, and he wound up a nobody. And several other instances of the same thing occurred at that time. And but we didn't have any one group maintaining all the power, whereas currently we're in danger of that very thing. And I think the risk is greater now than it's ever been. I think we are more divided than at any time since the 1850s, family to family to family. And the result at that time in 1860 was quite disastrous. And hopefully it won't come to that this time.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's really good. Well, look at the fact that we got 10 good people here, and we all know 10 people, and this is going up on YouTube tonight, and they know 10 people. Keep spreading the word, keep helping to educate, because a lot of people I just don't know what to do, and they're good people. They just need a little bit of education. And we got to keep fighting for the right stuff. That's really what Eris is about. It's about doing the right thing. It's not said anywhere, but that's what Eris is about. Doing the right thing. Everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have
Rick.
happy holidays,
Thank
safe
you.
travels. I will see you next week, and we will skip forth into the new year. Bless you all.
Night.
Bye.
Thank
Elvis
you.
says bye.
New
Thank you.
Year,
Happy
everyone.
New Year.
Thank you, Rick.
Happy New Year.
Happy New
everybody.
Year.